Machine learning algorithms are distinct from other kinds of autonomy in that they use these powerful statistical methods to identify patterns in large sets of data. They're not easy for humans to read and understand and predict how they'll perform once they're implemented in a real-world environment. I'm Colonel James Valpiani, call sign Fangs. I'm the Commandant of the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School. The Test Pilot School has 3 related missions. One is to create highly adaptive critical thinking test leaders. The second is to develop our staff, our world-class faculty here. And the third is to advance test research for the overall test enterprise. So autonomy in the rules-based form has been around since really the dawn of aviation. The first automated aircraft, the first autopilots were in the early 1910s. So right after the Wright brothers, this kind of autonomy takes the form of rules that experts derive and code. So if this, then this, if that, do that sort of coding. And you can accomplish an incredible amount with that kind of autonomy. The problem with this approach, though, is that it requires a kind of environment and a system that people can understand and derive rules for that are clear and applicable no matter how the context changes.
Go back to a traditional airplane where you literally have cables and pulleys connected. It is very clear, like when I move the stick in a certain place, that the flight controls should move exactly this much in relation to that input. And then in the F-16, that's a digital fly-by-wire, I still generally know that if I put the stick in a certain place in a very specific flight condition, that the aircraft flight controls should respond in a certain way. As we continue to advance, it's not that way. Where I can get into a very specific flight control condition, I can put in the exact same control input 2 times and get 2 different answers. That becomes much more difficult to test in some ways. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Michael Piccini. I go by CAP. I'm the commander of the 416th Flight Test Squadron, and I'm the director of the Air Power Foundation's Combined Test Force. Autonomy ready to me is a lot more than just hardware. It's infrastructure, it's processes and policy. It's establishing how we're going to test autonomy. Emerging Technologies has very much been focused on that problem, making sure that Edwards Air Force Base specifically has the infrastructure to really be the center of the testing universe. And in order to be that, we have to be able to test the latest, greatest technology. The combination of that skill set and that team that's pursuing that problem, along with traditional flight tests. So if we need those capabilities in combat, the work that we do in advance is what's going to determine how successful we are.
If you think about the kinds of challenges that and opportunities that face the Air Force and aviation in general going forward, we're talking about the kinds of environments where the context is very dynamic. That's where machine learning, a whole different kind of autonomy, has proven very promising. So machine learning essentially uses very advanced statistical tools to derive patterns from large quantities of data. The beauty of this approach, or the advantage and promise of this approach, is that we can derive very complex patterns that humans couldn't necessarily determine on their own. The problem is that those solutions are not easily evaluated. They take the form of statistical weightings and complex mathematical expressions that don't translate to an intuition about what the system is going to do. And why that matters from an X-62 perspective is these machine learning applications have tremendous promise for aviation and Air Force aviation in particular. But because they're not easily scrutinized, it's difficult to predict exactly how they're going to behave. We need a more robust safety environment within which to test and develop them before we're certain that they're usable in less controlled environments. And the X-62 provides really the world's first and currently only platform on which we have a safety sandbox, an autonomy sandbox, in which we can place software solutions that are not high in maturity, and they can behave very poorly, but the boundaries of the system are such that they will protect the aircraft, so that the crew that's sitting inside that serves as a safety monitor is never really at risk.
Everything about flight tests is about risk reduction. We could do no flight tests and turn it over to the combat air forces. It's probably not going to go well, right? That would be the extreme. And we're putting all that risk now on our warfighter. But if I can do testing that doesn't involve a direct risk to a human, I can potentially advance it a lot quicker. And the fact that we have that luxury really helps posture risk to where we can potentially expedite delivery of capabilities.
Due to the complexity of these modifications, the aircraft was officially designated the NF-16D.
So the X-62 began life as a bespoke F-16, and it was really designed as a research platform from the beginning. So it's actually designed physically in its construction differently than a production F-16. Its first mission was for thrust vectoring research, and that really was the genesis or the precursor to the F-22's thrust vectoring capability, which makes that aircraft the most lethal air-to-air combat fighter on the planet. So the NF-16, as it was known at the time, really began its life as an enabler for cutting-edge technology, and that, of course, is its story throughout its entire life. Really allowed the Air Force to test a whole series of different flight control systems as it went on to develop future platforms. What makes that aircraft unique is that it can represent the dynamics and the feel of a wide range of aircraft. We recognized that the aircraft had the potential, if we could layer on autonomy to it, to be once again a game-changing platform. So over the next several years, in partnership with AFRL, with DARPA, with the Air Force Test Center, to create what we call an autonomy sandbox, which allows us to place autonomous agents that control the aircraft into a bounded safety environment. The aircraft can still represent a C-17 or 747, and on top of that, we can layer on autonomous control of those aircraft to see how they perform. And so once again, the NF-16, which as a result of this autonomy became the X-62, is on the cutting edge of aviation research. Test pilot school and the X-62 in particular give us the ability to develop an intuition for how and when to trust and employ these kinds of systems. And a key aspect of our autonomy testing here is ensuring that the algorithms that we are testing conform to the expectations of responsible use. There are training rules and expectations of conduct that all human fighter pilots are expected to adhere to. In our partnership with DARPA and other agencies that are focused on developing AI agents, we've studied closely as they've developed their algorithms in a simulation environment to comply with those norms of responsible use. And then when we bring them over into real-world application in the X-62 from the simulation environment, we are assessing the same responsibility characteristics to ensure that they do behave according to all the same rules that we hold ourselves to as human pilots. The X-62 allows us to build confidence in the system, not only from the perspective of, are they efficacious? Do they do the mission that we set them out to do? But are they responsible? Do they behave in such a way that they adhere to the norms and expectations of responsible use that we have for all humans in these environments? Test really, at the end of the day, is about exploring the unknown in a disciplined fashion. So here we have a battle space where the dominant feature, the data-driven characteristic of the platforms we expect to see is the unknown. How do we trust? How do we know? How do we ensure that they're responsible? That's a perfect problem for test. That's our bread and butter, right? This is where we're happiest, is in the middle of a problem that's uncertain, ill-defined, there's some risk, maybe a lot of risk, and now you've got the recipe for a perfect test challenge. That is what the test pilot school is for. I hope that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when people look back at this moment in history, I hope that they will look back as well at the test pilot school and the X-62, and they will think of this community as a place where the focus on responsible development of autonomy really took off in aviation. The X-62 is really just one piece of technology. It's the people here and their focus on getting it right with respect to combat autonomy and autonomy in aviation in general, and making sure that it's not just efficient and safe, but also responsible. That I hope is a hallmark of our contribution as a community. That is the most important aspect of autonomy, is that it's something that we can trust and employ responsibly in the service of national defense, and really ultimately for the betterment of humanity.